when you started talking about, and again, I know you're not sure if this is the actual story, about Hercules being given two paths, one where he can get probably the things he thinks he wants quite easily, or you can take the hardest hell path. Now, I've tried to boil down what I think life is. It's a weird way to say it, but close enough. And what I think life is a quest to feel good about yourself when you're by yourself. And that going back to the thing I said earlier, evolution has guaranteed that you won't be proud of yourself unless it was hard as hell.
Oh, I like it. Listen, I'm often asked, why do you take such thorny issues? I mean, you already lead a stressful life as a, productive professor. Why do you have to jump and put your hat into all kinds of
Mm.
battles? And my answer that speaks exactly to your point about, you have to feel comfortable and proud within yourself is, it's exactly that. So I usually use the following imagery. When I go to bed at night and I put my head on the pillow, the only thing that can forestall insomnia in order for me to sleep well at night is if I felt that I never modulated my speech, my positions for some pragmatic careerist thing, right?
Mm.
Don't say that, even though it's the truth, because then that would reduce the likelihood of you getting that professorship or that job, right? If I do that, then I feel I'm fraudulent. Then I feel I'm fake. I'm inauthentic. I'm a fraud. And the most important thing for me is to always match my punishing code of personal conduct, not yours. I don't care what you think of me. I care what I think of me, to your point. And what I think of me is a really high perfectionist standard that I have to adhere to. And therefore, that's why I act the way that I do. And here I want to mention arguably the most profound thing that anyone ever told me. And in this case, it happens to be my mother. Many years ago, she looked at me and she said, Gad, the world doesn't operate according to your purity bubble. And the quicker that you find that out, the happier you'll be.
Mm.
Well, guess what? Till today, I often struggle with that because there's a clash between this beautiful, stylized purity bubble that I'd like to live in and the ugliness of the outside world. And so oftentimes when I'm indignant at somebody on social media, it's because I can't believe that you could be such an asshole, right? Whereas if I were more steeped in pragmatic reality, I would say, well, these kinds of folks exist and who
Mm.
cares? But it's my strain of purity which drives my punishing personal code of conduct that causes me to react that way. So I'm totally with you.
Mm. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think each of us have some animating spirit that gives us superpowers. My wife has a gear I almost don't have, which is righteous indignation. And I've always watched her click into that gear, and I see how, like, if you've ever seen a honey badger, in fact, oh my God, my wife is a honey badger. So when you see a honey badger attack things that are way bigger than it, you're just like, it's there's something impressive about it that makes even the bigger thing be like, whoa,
Yeah.
like it's just so there's so much aggression, so much certainty that alone gives you pause. And every time I see her do it, I'm like, that state of mind is a superpower because it eliminates anxiety, it eliminates fear. She
100%.
cannot help herself but charge forward. And so it's clearly, even though it is very rare that I'll find myself in that gear, it's very rare, or it's very clear that there's a huge evolutionary advantage. Can't be wrong too many times, but it is one of those things. Like, there's a reason that there's a spectrum of personalities when you look at it again from the group selection standpoint.
Absolutely. And by the way, to the point of indignation, you mentioned righteous indignation of your wife. So in preparing the research and for writing the happiness book, of course, I got into all of the ancient wisdoms, the
Mhm.
Stoic philosophy, and so on.
Yeah.
And I had recently a guest on my show, Donald Robertson, who wrote a book, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor,
Hmm.
which is a book on Marcus Aurelius. Really, really cool book. Very, very beautiful read. And at one point, I saw some Stoic edicts that, in my view, were contrary to basic evolutionary principles. So let me mention it. So the Stoics will say that oftentimes what causes you pain is not the event itself, but the way you respond to the event, right?
Mm.
So, for example, if someone defames you on Twitter or in life, insults you, well, who cares about that event? Why don't you rise above it as a stoic and realize that if you go like this, then it goes away? That can't make sense in every situation because you and I have evolved the emotional system that causes us to be indignant if, for example, you engage in reputational damage, right? And it's precisely the fact that you're worried that if you say something that is very insulting, that I might beat the shit out of you, that stops you from doing that. If we remove that from the playing field, if under no circumstances will I ever be righteously indignant at something ridiculous that you've said about me, then there's a lot of miscreants that will game that, right? Because they know that Tom is a full stoic and he will never respond irrespective of what I write about him. So even in the context of the breathtaking wisdom of the Stoics, I think some of their tenets are irrational from an evolutionary perspective.
That's interesting. And I think that the evolutionary lens is pretty profound. It goes back to the thing about religion that I find interesting, which is religion is trying to present in a simple way that can be handed off those things that are most likely to be high functioning for you at the time that it was written. Obviously,
Right.
over time it will change, which is why I actually think that religion does need to ignore some things and embrace others. But evolution does the same thing. When you look at, like we were talking off camera about something I'd never heard of, which is an evolutionary literary criticism,
Exactly.
like at looking at how well did this story get to the human condition.
Right.
Um, that to me is very wise, because now going back to one of the core beliefs that makes up my frame of reference is that we have these biological algorithms running in our brain, that the brain is designed to be a prediction engine, and that when you don't know what the truth is, the easiest way to assess it is to say, my current belief system makes the following prediction. So if I do this, I will get this result. So I will do that thing. Did I get that result? If yes, then I must be pretty close to ground truth. If no, I'm off somewhere. Something is broken in the beliefs that make up my prediction engine. And so that's where, if people can really take a framework around evolution, I think that they can very quickly get to something where it'd be like, oh, this makes sense to test. Because looking back, I can, at least from an informed hypothesis standpoint, I can come up with a reason why this might be true.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your defense of the value of evolutionary psychology, because one of the things that I get righteously indignant about is when some imbecile on social media says, but evolutionary psychology is just a bunch of unfalsifiable, just so storytelling, and nothing could be further from the truth. And here I'm going to demonstrate that by pointing to our earlier conversation about nomological networks of cumulative evidence. It is within the epistemology of evolutionary psychology to look for all of those distinct lines of evidence before you make the proclamation that something is an adaptation. In other words, the standard of evidence that you have to reach before you make that pronouncement is actually unbelievably higher than for all of the other scientific claims that are made out there. So it's actually the exact opposite of what the idiot is accusing me of. He's thinking I'm sitting with a cognac, a cigar, and I'm going, let me make up some bullshit story about why men like women to be of that body type. It's just some fanciful story. Whereas I can get you data from across cultures, from across time periods, from across art traditions that demonstrate that that body type is preferred for very clear evolutionary reasons. So I'm with your wife here. There are very clear, justifiable reasons why you should be at times honey badger indignant.
No, I get it. And I think it works. Going back to, it also has a price to pay. I will say
Yeah.
that
My
you
cortisol
and my
levels,
wife,
my cortisol levels
yeah,
go up.
yeah. The number of times that I have to go to my wife and say, the question you need to ask right now is, what are you trying to accomplish?
Right.
Because if what you're trying to accomplish is ideologically smashing that person in the teeth, not physically, obviously,
Yeah.
but like you want that sort of, they must understand that they're wrong. Cool, keep going. If, on the other hand, you have some other outcome, or you're trying to get a deal done or whatever, you might want to approach
I
this.
suffer from not seeing that at times.
Yeah. And there is a conflict that I get from your perspective where it's like, you don't want to cross the line and not be authentic.
Yeah.
And so in fact, my pitch to you about you're not as big as you should be given how good your ideas are. And so now the question becomes, why aren't you as big? Now, you just so happen to, I can just project all of my own realizations about myself onto you. So this will be fun. The reason that you're not as big as you should be for how good your ideas are is because you have emotional friction around picking a lane. So if you're going to be broad, what you have to do is you have to tell people what the connective tissue is. And once you give them the connective tissue and they can be like, oh, okay, cool, here are the ideas that we're going to hang our hat on. Then it's like, oh, cool, thank you. You've given me a way to group you. You've told me you're in a new lane, fine, but you have to tell me what that lane is.
That's deep, man. Thank you. That's
for
beautiful.
Sure. Trust me, this is me beating the shit out of myself
That's
trying to figure out.
beautiful, really.
So once you do that, one, it will clarify your own thoughts because there are going to be guests that you shouldn't have on, even though you're interested and it's fascinating. At some point, like that one probably exists outside of the thing you really care about, at least in the grander scheme. I think that kind of thing is important. So my point is, you want to be authentic 100%, but you also want to be strategic. You don't just want to say like everything that crosses your mind. It's like, what's my goal in this situation? How do I align myself? And so, when I look at the Canadian accent thing, whatever, it's like, I actually kind of get that one. Like part of who you are clearly as a person is to be playful, to be funny. And I heard Jamie Foxx talk about this, and it was really heartbreaking for me because he's of an earlier generation where he got famous walking the line of things you're not supposed to say. And that made him him. And that was the fun. And that's why we loved him. And people may not even remember him from that era back in like in Living Color and stuff where he was fucking outrageous. And what he said was, in this cancel culture era, you have to tuck it in a bit.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly what he meant. He had to dial himself down. He had to not go for the joke that might risk spilling over the line because you're not forgiven for that anymore. It's not like, oh, you're a comedian. And to your point,
isn't that tragic though?
It is literally tragic because I think humanity loses something because now you're asking the Messis of the world don't get quite that good.
Exactly.
Right? Like Messi in his prime, it didn't look human.
Yeah.
And it inspired me so much to think, wait, I could get that good at something? I mean, I'm not going to get that good at soccer given my genetics, but like, could there be a thing I could get that good at? It's just super fucking inspiring and just entertaining. Let's say it doesn't inspire me to want to do it. I still get to witness it.
Yeah.
And so the thought of comedians tucking it in is fucking heartbreaking to me. So I get why that might be a bright line for you that like I'm over my dead body. Like no one is going to make me backtrack on that because I'm not going to tuck it in because that's something to me that when you carry it out, it's really problematic.
Well, you're really identifying my psychology. That's beautiful, man. That's brilliant.
Thank you,
I might have to start calling you Dr. Tom.
Wow. I'll take an honorary doctorate from you. I just think that is really important for people to understand what is my bigger strategy here. What am I trying to get out? I'm not going to cross the line of being authentic, but I'm not going to treat everything like it's the fight.
No, amen. I got it. I get it. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what to add to that other than I'm actually I'm not blowing smoke up your proverbial behind. I'm amazed by the psychological acuity that you just exhibited.
Oh, thank you, man.
And I don't think you could have been successful in life in the way you have if you didn't have those insights. And this is why, by the way, I'm not an academic elitist. In other words, when we talked earlier, for example, about Dave Chappelle, and I said to you, remember what I said? I said, Dave Chappelle is probably more intelligent than most of my colleagues.
Oh, Jesus,
he doesn't have all of our fancy degrees. So there are many, many ways by which one can exhibit their profundity, and you certainly have done so in this last analysis.
If you like that clip, check out another powerful clip right here, and I'll see you there.